Good evening and welcome. It's my privilege to have everyone here with us for the Together Against Hate series. My name is Joellen Unger. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Jewish Community Alliance here in Jacksonville, representing not only the JCA, but our CEO, Adam Chaskin, who is actually in Chicago this week, getting a certificate in combating anti-Semitism. So it's a good reason for him not to be with us this evening. Our series was actually designed to address difficult topics that are impacting Jacksonville, from anti-Semitism and racism at home to the unfolding war between Hamas and Israel. Community is needed now more than ever. Since this speaker series began, events both locally and globally have shaken us. In the front row tonight, you will notice an empty chair. This chair stands empty, representing the hostages being held captive in Gaza and all of the innocent victims who are not home with their loved ones. Together Against Hate first began before the war in Israel, or even before the notable rise in anti-Semitism and racist incidents in Jacksonville and throughout Northeast Florida. And as a proud parent of a differently abled adult son who attends community campus at the Arc of St. John's, tonight's topic is even more meaningful to me. The program is designed to engage us all in meaningful conversation about diverse abilities and what we can do to support one another to create a better and more welcoming community in the beautiful city that we call home. Again, thank you all for being here this evening, and it is my pleasure to welcome Eric Mann, President and CEO of the First Coast YMCA.
Thank you, Joellen, and please accept my thanks for all of you being here this evening. We firmly believe through this series that we as a community can help change the narrative. And we talk about it a lot, whether it's through education, through awareness. We believe that it's going to take this type of collaboration between different organizations, JCA and the Y, along with 904, with the ARC, with a lot of the other organizations we partner with. Together Against Hate will continue to be something we do to help change our community, our Jacksonville community, for the better. Together Against Hate, we began as an idea with myself and Adam. Adam relocated from Albany, New York, and he had a relationship with my peer, colleague in Albany, New York, with the Y, and so he gets here and he calls me up, and we just started a conversation about how we might work together. And so over the last 4.5 years, different occasions happened where we both would call. He would call and say, what do you do about training your lifeguards? And I'd call and say, what do you do about working on your tennis courts? And it started out that way. And last year at the Vigil, which was downtown after the football game, escaping of our buildings, we both started talking about what could we do together to help fight this in our community. And so that simple conversation turned into another conversation where we invited our senior leaders to talk about an idea. It's coming to fruition in February. It's called Race Against Hate. It's a 5K run that we're going to do really to raise the awareness. From there, the rest of our staff teams got together, what I call the smart people, and they created the idea about this series. And so this is the fourth of 5 different topics that we're doing. And so you understand this right here, we started this months ago, and it was announced in the paper on a Wednesday, and that following Saturday was when we had the murders over at the dollar store. And so for us, we were already looking at how can we, as organizations that most people would probably say, the Y and JCA working together? Well, actually, in a lot of ways, we're very similar, and so we're perfect partners from that standpoint. And so we're talking about how do we help before some of these things were happening. And so this is a genuine effort by our organization and the organizations that we work with. And you see a lot of them. We want to thank the CSX, the Jewish Federation, and the Foundation for Northeast Florida, the Team Up Project, which is a national collaboration between Catholic Charities USA, Habitat Humanity International, Interfaith America, and the YMCA of the USA. And so this effort won't end. We believe that it has really spurred us to continue to look at how can we go into 24 past the race and continue to have these types of conversations in a safe space where it's open to the community. We want everyone to come in and listen. A lot of this is how do we listen and see other views and hopes create better understanding. And so thank you very much for being here. We got support organizations like LJD, Jewish Family and Community Services, 904 Forward, JASMYN, the Arc, OneJax, and Interfaith Center of Northeast Florida. We're playing a leading role, and on behalf of Adam, myself, and our incredible staff, thank you for being here this evening. With that, I'd like to call up our mayor, Mayor Donna Deegan.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be with you this evening and nice to see so many people here. We have to continue these conversations and we have to take them to as many places in Jacksonville as we can possibly get to because they're so very important. I want to thank you to Adam and Eric for initiating this speaker series and taking an important stance against hate and bias throughout our entire city. When the series kicked off, I issued a proclamation making September 14th, 2023, Together Against Hate Day in Jacksonville. The proclamation commended the work done to create Together Against Hate and promote unity in our diverse community. It's also encouraged Jacksonville residents to come together, to see each other's humanity. That is the key to everything, and to take a strong stand against hate in the hope of building a more inclusive community for all of us. To that end, I want to reaffirm the value that all are welcome in this beautiful mosaic that we call Jacksonville. No matter who you are, no matter what you look like, no matter your level of ability, where you are from, who you love, or how you worship if you do. We will never tolerate hate. An attack on one community is an attack on every single one of us. It is a new day here in Jacksonville. Our administration is committed to supporting all of our diverse residents, and we are very grateful for organizations like the JCA and the YMCA that are as well. We are also committed to unity and to choosing love over fear, because a united community is a thriving community, and that's what we all want. So please join me now in welcoming tonight's moderator, Erica Moore, the Vice President of Social Responsibility and Operations at the First Coast YMCA, for a discussion on diverse abilities with our friends from Daystar and the Arc Jacksonville. Thank you so much for letting me join you tonight.
Good evening. I'd like to take a moment to thank you all for being here tonight as we're on this journey for us to learn, support, and raise awareness for individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities. Your presence and dedication are truly appreciated, and I'm confident that together we can create a community that is truly inclusive and welcoming to all. So as we're on this journey, the two panelists will share their insights on the history of individuals with IDD and the integration of community-based services. They will also provide guidance on how we can assist and better support this unique community. Without further ado, I would like to introduce two incredibly talented individuals, Carrie Bates, President and CEO of the Arc of Jacksonville, and Matthew Richashar, the Regional Director of YMCA Daystar. How are you both doing? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, so before we get started into the questions and learning more about the history, Could you please just explain to the audience a little bit more about yourselves and how you got into the space of working with individuals with IDD?
Sure. As Erica said, my name is Carrie Bates. I've been with the Arc Jacksonville for about 2 years. I have worked with people with differences for a total now of 9 years. 9 years ago, I was working in healthcare and hospitals, and I had a daughter who had a difference, and it made me just rethink what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I visited the Arc, which is some of what we'll talk about tonight, and really just had an experience that made me see things differently and made me realize how much value people with differences have and how much they can give to our community. And really just I walked into a room and saw people and interacted with people that I thought were some of the most deserving and valuable assets, and felt like in a lot of ways they were kind of unseen. So just decided that was a career shift I wanted to make, and then led me here to Jacksonville 2 years ago.
That's great. Matthew?
And I'm Matt Rostischer. I'm the regional director of the YMCA's Daystar. I've been with Daystar for about 1.5 years, but prior to that, I ran group homes for intensive behavior individuals with the May Institute in Orange Park, Florida. I fell into the field. I started working part-time, found a community that needed a voice that I really wanted to help, and I've loved every minute of working with this community. So I've been working for about 15 years.
That's great. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate the introductions. Before we get into the questions, I would like to share, we'll have 2 videos tonight, so I want to share our first one. It goes into some of the work that's happening over at Daystar, and then Carrie is also one of our special guests, and she'll talk a little bit about the partnership of the Arc of Jacksonville and the Brooks YMCA. So we have the first video.
I'm Matt Rostischer, and I'm the regional director of the Daystar program here at the YMCA's First Coast. So an adult day training program is an ADT, and our basic goal is to teach individuals over the age of 22 daily living skills and also give them a place to socialize with other individuals like themselves. So what makes Daystar different is their partnership with the Y, and being part of the Y is so many ADTs, their thing is to get their participants out into the community, where the YMCA has the community come to us, and we can go to the gym and be with members, or go to a pool and swim with members. That's really the biggest difference, is that we have the community right at our fingertips, and it is huge for our individuals for their socialization.
My name is Shakina Roberts. I am the Daystar site supervisor. We start our day here at Daystar. At 8:30, the individuals arrive, and after they arrive, we do check and change, and we check them and do their personal care. And then after that, we bring them over to the activity table, and we do an activity for the day. It's special just because you're taking care of someone that can't take care of themselves, and you're just touching their hearts and having fun, singing and dancing and just doing all the different things with them each day.
30 years ago, a group of parents, we knew we all needed programs for our disabled children who were getting out of school. And there was very few programs, and we wanted them Christ-like, we wanted them healthy, happy, good staffing. And so we met and we proceeded to start ASK. Eventually, we needed a better place for multiple handicap or found children. So that's when the YMCA gathered together with us and started Daystar. And it has been the best program because of their care, their concern, the TLC. He's getting everything he needs here, and I don't worry, stress at all from 9 to 2 every day. I know he's fine, and that's such a blessing to me. Very welcoming, very kind, very considerate, and very patient with a parent like me that wants to be involved, wants to know how he is. We even have a folder that we get written in every day about his daily activities, which I've never had his whole life. And they call me for the just minimum things. That means a lot. And he's happy, and I'm happy.
Hi, Hi, I'm Carrie Bates. I am the president and CEO of the Arc Jacksonville. We support around 500 people every day in Northeast Florida who have intellectual and developmental differences. But what we do is help people, whether it's get a job, keep a job, if they want to live independently, if they might need more support in their home. We just meet them where they're at and try to help them just have the best life possible. When I first started at the Arc Jacksonville, one of the first things I became aware of was the partnership, and it was new to me. I hadn't, in my other experience, I had never heard of anything like it. And it is one of the coolest partnerships. We have one group that is able to go to the Y and just participate in classes. They go work out, and the Y has really led the way with including people regardless of their abilities. And that's what one of the main purposes of the ARC is, just to advocate for that and allow people to be part of their community. Daystar specifically, I would say, is one of the best examples of inclusion. The people with intellectual and developmental differences that get to come here have the option to participate in classes and just be among their peers in the community. And a huge benefit of the YMCA Daystar program, I would say, is that everyone else in the community gets the opportunity to interact with people with differences. So the members that come here get to see people who might be different than them, but they see them working towards the same goals and wanting the same thing in life, a happy life.
My hopes for Daystar is to see it expand to other Ys in the First Coast. There are currently 22,000 individuals on a wait list looking for services that the state is hopefully trying to get off that wait list. So they're going to need providers to provide the services as they get off, and I hope to see Daystar grow and be available to those individuals as they come off the wait list.
The YMCA really just leads the way in a community of inclusion.
Good, right? We can clap. Thank you. Carrie and Matt, great job with that. We'll have one more here in a few, but I think in any community that we're trying to understand, thank you. Any community that we're trying to understand, I think it's important for us to get a better understanding of the history. So our first question, I'll start with you, Carrie, is can you give us an example of advice that was given to parents in the early 1950s, specifically from doctors?
Sure, and I agree. I think the history is really important for us all to understand. I know when I first transitioned to the field, I had a mentor who really drove into me some of the history. And part of it is because understanding we still support many people who have lived through this history. So understanding what they've been through and meeting them where they're at, but then also making sure we don't make the same mistakes again with the best of intentions. So many of you will recall back in the 50s when someone was born with an intellectual or developmental difference, oftentimes medical professionals would advise the family to place the child in an institution, advising it was best for the child and for the family. And there's many documented stories that follow people who have lived that journey. And I'll tell you, we serve today people who we took out of institutions in the 70s and 80s. I know one of the first families I met when I started in this field 7 years ago was a family that their sibling had come out of Sunland in Gainesville, and they had never known her. They knew later in life that they had her, and they found her. One of the siblings lived in Hawaii, one lived in New York, and really tried to build a relationship with her. But truly the trauma was there for all of them at that point. And she had gone on to live totally independently. She worked, she owned her own home at the time. And I think of the opportunity she would have had she not had that time in the institution. But that goes back to the history. Obviously, that's not what we do today, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah. Matt, would you like to add?
So yeah, I think another thing that really was important was they looked at a medical model where they used medications to treat. There was no learning, there was no teaching. It was just give some medication, put them in an institution, and that's what's best for them. And really, we found that that's definitely not what's best for them now.
No, I think that's great. Thank you so much for the history. So how did community-based services come around in the 1970s? Like, what was the history and the research there, and how did that all happen?
So most of the services that even exist today, I would say, were spearheaded and really created because of families. The ARC exists because of families. Every ARC in the country was founded by a different group of families that wanted more for their child. So as Matt said, there wasn't any education, so families were saying, we want more, we want to keep our child home, and we want them to have similar opportunities. And that really started, many day programs that you would hear about started because of people wanting something meaningful to do during the day. Later in the 80s, it's kind of interesting, the waiver, which is the funding that we'll talk about a little bit later, it came to be because there were people, specifically it started with a 3-year-old little girl who was receiving services in a hospital, and her family said, we want to take her home, we can care for her at home, and the funding streams essentially dictated that she had to stay in the hospital. And at the time it was 1981, President Reagan basically said this is ridiculous, and they created what we now call the waiver because she received a waiver to receive services at home. So that then paved the way for paid services, where prior to that it was more family-led services, which is really what most of our services today are born out of that. And I'll say, we'll talk about it later. To this day, families are almost exclusively responsible for all of the really good things that we're doing because they have a passion. We know parents have a passion like no other. So it started that way, and I think the advocacy that continues to exist is hugely because of the work of parents.
That's great. Matt?
Yeah, so I think a lot of, unfortunately, people don't really think about the IDD population unless it directly affects them. So President Kennedy in the 60s had a sister who has some disabilities, and he formed a group of advisors that studied over in Europe how they would dealt with this population. So they came back and they were really impressed with the Scandinavian countries because they didn't use institutions. They had them out in the community. They integrated them. They had education. So he went with that, and that was his suggestion. So then move into the 70s, you had Willowbrook, Geraldo did a thing and showed society how bad institutions, some institutions really were. They just weren't, people weren't treated with any kind of dignity at all. So that brought a light to the parents, and then the parents really pushed for better conditions.
Wow, yeah, thank you for that, Matt. I remember watching that video after you guys told me to go check that out, so I really appreciate just being able to learn more about that space and the transition, right? How it all started, but just where we are now, and just so thankful for both the ARC and Daystar for all the work that you do. So as we wrap up and we continue with our questions, I want to move into the second video, and that second video is going to talk specifically about the ARC of Jacksonville. So we'll play that last one and we'll keep going.
In 1965, a group of parents formed the Arc Jacksonville with a shared vision of providing their loved ones with more opportunities to live full and independent lives. Since then, we have served and advocated for thousands of individuals and families to achieve their full potential. At the Arc Jacksonville, we believe that individuals of all abilities should have quality options for how they live, learn, work, and play in our community. Every individual deserves a beautiful, quality place to call home. In 2016, we opened the Arc Jacksonville Village, a first-of-its-kind affordable neighborhood that provides 121 residents with a safe, supportive environment to live independently. The village features a community center offering state-of-the-art amenities and daily activities. Throughout the city, we also operate 6 community homes that provide 24/7 specialized care for a total of 50 residents with a higher level of needs.
As a family member, the most important aspect about Ed living at Grove House is that I know he is taken care of. He is fed healthy meals. They make sure he gets his medications on time every day, and they keep up with all of his doctor's appointments. Because I work full-time, I just can't always take him like that. Wonderful care. I couldn't ask for better.
All members of our community should have the opportunity to earn a living and pursue employment. You can find individuals with intellectual and developmental differences working in many different industries across the city, thanks to our partnerships with local businesses. The Arc Jacksonville supports our participants by helping them prepare for employment, placing them in community jobs, and providing ongoing support and job coaching. We provide young adults with many opportunities to further their education and develop independent living and employment skills. Our on-campus transition program at the University of North Florida provides students with a true college experience as they live on campus, audit classes, and participate in UNF activities and clubs with support from mentors and staff.
My favorite part being an OCT student is being able to do the classes on campus and also doing the free events on campus, the UNF events.
One of our newest programs, Career Campus, is a partnership with Florida State College at Jacksonville and prepares students for employment by offering academic studies and practical job training in the career path of their choice. From meaningful day programs and mental health services to Friday night dance parties, the Arc Jacksonville aims to enable individuals to thrive and live their most self-sufficient, fulfilled lives. Programs like our specialized aging support, which provides services for individuals with or at risk of Alzheimer's disease-related dementia, increase quality of life and well-being for not just the participants, but also their caregivers. Each year, we provide over 2,000 families with vital information, referrals, training, and resources through our family support services. We invite you to get involved with the Arc Jacksonville and be part of creating a more inclusive Jacksonville community that embraces individuals of all abilities. Your support of our mission will allow us to empower the possible for the hundreds of families that we serve every day.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. That's good. Great job. So the Arc and Daystar, you do outstanding work as demonstrated in the two videos that we just saw. However, I'd like to now discuss the barriers that this community is facing and the specific work from your viewpoint of the Arc and then also from Daystar. Tag, you're it.
Sure. So, like you saw in the video, Daystar is all about socialization. So it's just getting the individuals socialized with the members of the Y. Just getting the members to see that it's not so scary to play basketball with a person with IDD, or that you can lift weights with somebody with IDD, and have them out in the community is such a big part. Some of the barriers that we really face are like the more practical things like transportation. You know, how does a family afford a van specifically for a wheelchair? And if they can they use it to come to a day program like that? We're finding they can't ride a bus, so we have like 2 providers that come to Clay County when we really need about 6. So just finding the people to work with the community is really difficult.
And I would add, I think all of us, we serve a very diverse population within our own population. If you think we're serving people with Down syndrome, people with autism, people with cerebral palsy that might have physical needs. So it's a pretty wide scope, and really each takes specialization. People with intellectual and developmental differences are just like the rest of us. They have different interests. They want to do different things during the day, during the evening, and really trying to give people what they need can sometimes be really hard. And I think just in general, it's we have to remember we're not trying to fix people, so we're trying to help people and give them the supports they need and help them be as independent as they can be. But just like all of us, as adults, we don't want to be fixed. We just want to have a meaningful life. So sometimes I think that's a challenge, even sometimes when we talk about grants and funding and success of things. In our world, we serve someone who was born the way they are. And so our goal is not to necessarily make them anything other than exactly who they are. It's more about getting the community to see the value they bring versus trying to make the person more like us. If that makes sense.
No, I think that's great. And then just really, the mental health component. Like, can you chime in a little bit more about that and not having those resources, how it impacts them mentally?
Yes, so it's interesting. I've been to a lot of professional development seminars lately talking about loneliness for all of us, especially I think during COVID, it became such a talked about conversation, and we realized how loneliness impacts us. So I just heard recently, loneliness is the greatest predictor of your mental health. And so if you think about, like Matt mentioned, the barrier of transportation and getting somewhere and paying for something, that immediately someone with a difference is going to have a much steeper hill to climb to be socialized and be out in the community. And then that impacts mental health. And we know now, which we haven't always recognized, that at least a third of the people we support also have a co-occurring mental health diagnosis. So we're looking for ways. The Arc is opening a residential home in the next few months, which is one of the first in the state that's serving the people with a dual diagnosis of an intellectual difference and a mental health diagnosis. Because truly, for probably far too long, people's mental health needs have gone undetected, untreated. I think that's probably true for all of us, but certainly someone with an intellectual or developmental difference, where it might be a little harder to differentiate what is the disability and what is actually perhaps some anxiety, depression, something like that that's coming through.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating a little bit more on that. And so Matt, this question is for you. You gave a great presentation in one of our committee meetings. So I just want to ask you if we can discuss like how state funding limits community-based programs for individuals with IDD, and additionally, how does the reduction of these programs impact our community?
So there's 35,000 individuals in Florida that are on the waiver program that are getting services, which is great. They're getting the services they need, but there's also 23,000 that are on a wait list to get services. And that wait list can take up to 10 years to get off of. So when you think about the parent who has a child that they've raised, and all of a sudden something happens and they can no longer take care of them, that you look for help from the state for funding, and the funding's not there, or they have to wait 10 years to get the help they need. And it's a huge barrier for the families, for the individual. I think something like 30% of individuals are being taken care of, their caregiver is over the age of 60. So not only now is the individual looking for help, but the parent who's over 60 that can no longer take care of them is now worrying, what's going to happen to my child when I'm no longer here? So, there's just so many barriers with the funding, and the population is growing. It's not, age expectancy's longer, and the funding's just not keeping up with it.
Wow.
Yeah, Matt actually told me, I always have all these like crazy numbers, and Matt said for every one person in our state that receives state-funded services, there are 4 people who do not with an intellectual difference, and that's kind of staggering to think about. As many people as we support and our colleagues throughout the Northeast Florida area support, there are so many people that are in need of help. And as Matt said, you think about the impact on the caregiver and then the impact on the community. So, the people who are caregiving then cannot participate in community life, and then potentially their mental health needs increase, and it just becomes a much bigger problem for the community. And truly, Florida has unfortunately really fallen behind other states. There's a lot of data to support that, I will say. Today, the first budget for Florida came out, and there is some funding for wait lists and things like that that Matt talked about. So we're hoping to really rally the community around those issues, and that's something we'll be sharing more about in the coming months, really to try to advocate to get more people the supports they need.
Thank you. And I always think about the caregivers as we were, I was asking this question, and just in order for a caregiver to be able to take care of anyone around them, they have to be able to take care of themselves. So would love to explore some opportunities there of just how we can help them in addition to helping the individuals with IDD. So we can continue to talk about that offline. Okay, so with the IDD community experiences additional barriers to life, such as stigma attached consistently, as we've discussed before. It would be interesting to hear from each of you, how do we go about access for services like employment, voting opportunities, public transportation, which you talked about earlier, Matt, and with that being such an excessive factor for inclusion in the community, what opportunities do you see there?
So we've mentioned mental health, we mentioned transportation. It's important, I think, to always remember that people with an intellectual difference are at a higher risk for almost any risk factor you can think of. poverty, homelessness, really just about anything. And so much of it, transportation becomes hugely important. I can't stress that enough because of the ability to get to work, to get to your friend's house, to get to somewhere else to get services that you need, to get to our programs. Oftentimes you need to have transportation. So I think that a lot boils down to that. Certainly the Jacksonville community has come a long way in transportation versus some of the more rural parts of the state that really struggle. But really just looking at just like we all, for each of us, an individual's needs, if it's someone in your church community, and figuring out what are their barriers to getting the services they need and helping the person overcome that barrier. And it's always very individualized. It's very hard to solve the problems in mass, which is why we need community support.
Yeah, and I think, Matt, we've discussed like voting opportunities, right? Not only having access to vote, but understanding what these individuals are actually voting for. Can you chime in a little bit there?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's I don't know who to vote for. What information is what information is real and what information is not real. So when you think about somebody with IDD, there's no training to teach them what politicians are moving legislation for them. There's no forum for that. So I mean, yeah, it's great to say somebody should be able to vote, but we also need to find a way to have forums to talk about how can we help this population rather than just, okay, go vote for whoever you like,
Yeah. Or whoever someone tells you to vote for,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So the education there is something important that we should consider and think about. Okay. So my favorite question, right, specifically with the IDD community is reducing these barriers. How can we as people just become better allies?
That's a great question. And that's something I think we aim to do every day that's why we focus on inclusion so much, is so that the community can recognize. And we have a group that goes to the YMCA Brooks from our village, and truly people there are embraced just like any of us would be. And I have to give Eric and her team so much credit. She's even said if a member acts some kind of way about the art being there. There is no tolerance for that at the YMCA. We are embraced there, and I think that models it. Then for everyone else in that community, I think one of the videos mentioned, then every person at the YMCA then has had that experience and seen the value. And I was just talking to a couple before, and they were saying they witnessed someone who was working at Publix helping an elderly person today. And so you have to really see those and live those experiences to understand this is not just about what we can do for people with differences. They have so much value we have to see in them. I really do think Jacksonville's fortunate. We have a lot of great things going for us as it relates to people with intellectual and developmental differences. We're always paving the way, humble brag, but I mentioned the lodge earlier. The village is one of the first of its kind in the country, and there's a lot that exists in partnering with those, the ARC, the Y, other providers, DSAJ. There's a lot of good happening. So I think there's really good bones to really continue the conversation and figure out how to get people involved. And certainly we always are looking for volunteers, and it's not just because we want you to come help us. Truly, we want you to have that experience, because if you sit beside someone and work beside someone and you hear their life story, that's how you understand where someone came from. For all of us, that's how we relate. So.
Yeah, I think it's being an advocate and realizing that just because it may not directly affect you, you may not have a family member that has IDD, but you are part of the community, so you have to include everybody in that community and think about everybody in that community and take time and slow down and realize that not every disability is the same. Not every person with a disability is the same. Just because one person has Down syndrome, they're not going to act just like another person with Down syndrome. And just really including them in everything and taking the time to see the value, like Carrie said, is just huge.
And I would just add for whatever profession you come from, whatever social groups you're in, there's probably a place there. So, we do a lot of training with medical professionals and up-and-coming medical professionals. And it's as much about again, helping them know what a person with IDD may need, but also the caregiver. There are so many caregivers that probably many of us interact with every day, and we have no idea the responsibility they're carrying. And how we can really support the caregiver is just as important in some ways as how we support the person with difference.
And I think, for this last question, both of you, just thinking of like us as leaders in this space and leaders of a business or an organization, Matt, how can we do a better job of supporting our staff and providing resources there?
Like Carrie said, thinking about the caregivers, you probably have staff that work for you, or you're probably around people every day that they may be caring for somebody at home that you have no idea, and you have to think about that. And then also, there's so many problems going on in the world right now. We think about race equality, and we think about the Jewish, but we also have to include this population when we do different groups in our workplace, and think about them as well.
100% agree. Carrie?
I think a really critical thing right now in our world is identifying needs earlier, for sure. The 18 to 22 age range is really a big gap for people with intellectual and developmental differences. They've oftentimes gone through school and had pretty good supports, and then they kind of fall off the cliff. And that's where some of the programs that Matt and I run really come into play. But really identifying those needs earlier, helping families identify what they're going to need earlier, just helps really plan for the long term. And I think just recognizing that every person is so unique. Every person we support is so unique, their needs are so unique, and really appreciating that. And I think we can all agree it's the right thing to do to include people. It's the right thing to do to be nice. But I think when you genuinely get to know someone and have that experience and sit beside them and learn about their life story, then it's not an act of kindness. It's truly you see their value. And that's what we all want to belong. It's not just about including, it's about making people feel like they actually belong in the conversation.
Yeah, and I think speaking of belonging and including, I think it's a great opportunity now for us to introduce Cammie. Yeah,
I am
here.
so excited that we have Cammie Downey with us today. Cammie, you can come on up. Cammie is going to tell you a little bit about herself, but she lives at the Village and is a huge fan of the YMCA Brooks, and she'll share a little bit about what she does when she goes there.
Thank you. And thank you for that lovely video, because I just went in the wig. This is my actual hair. Yes. My name is Cammie Elizabeth Downey, and I live at the Arc. It's a wonderful place, and I've been going to SAS as well, and they've been helping me a lot. And Abby, and she is a good person, and something of Jean, and I like the YMCA. I've been there before for the explore classes. It is really fun, and keep on moving and be open, and it's felt good, and keep on. I've been exercising a lot, and I am very athletic, and thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for Carrie. This is a wonderful place in my life. I have a good family, and I hope you guys enjoy the whole world. Thank you.
Great job.
Nice job.
I have to say, Erica, we were talking about ways we learn from people with differences, and right when we got here, Cammie said, she's not scared at all, she's confident, she's got this, she can do it. Well, we're like, oh, here we go, we got to do this. So kind of channeling Cammie's inner confidence as we go through.
Yeah, lots of confidence, lots of confidence. So now Yeah, we'll start off with questions. Do you guys want me to walk around the room? Thank you, Cammie. You did great. Is there any questions? Yeah.
Would anyone like to ask a question? How are you facilitating the transitions for the 18 to 22-year-olds to your programs? Is it primarily through parents coming to you, or are you reaching out in local school systems, such as like Alden Road or special needs systems?
It's more the latter. We try to reach out through the school systems, and we do try to get in as early as possible. I think like all of us, it's so hard. It's easy to say, I can't tell you how many times that people show up at 22 and are like, oh, my child just graduated, now what? You know, and it's easy for us to be like, oh my gosh, how did they wait until the last minute? But I think that's a reminder of the crisis that parents are facing. I mean, they're dealing with tomorrow most days, and what are they gonna get tomorrow? So we always wanna reach people earlier, but oftentimes they're kind of not ready to figure out long-term. They really just wanna get through. So we do a lot of presentations in schools. Certainly connecting to people is sometimes the hardest, and that's why these forums are great for us, so that now when you interact with people in the community, you know if someone shows up and has a need, you can point them. We have an advocacy department that does a lot of family supports to help guide those conversations and people to understand what their options are. There are options, the 18 to 22 age range, parents do have options. The UNF program, we talked about the FSCJ program, depending on what the person wants to do, but it's as much about kind of the long-term, you know, what are the dreams at that point? Is it to live independently? And then that's where we have to start really advocating for the funding, because right now most people, once they get to 22, are not going to be able to receive funding from the state for a long while. So that's kind of a gap. But certainly it starts with the schools. It starts with conversations in your communities of saying, have you kind of thought about what's next? Because we are there to help guide those conversations.
I have a follow-up to that as well. So that's for the people out of high school or finishing higher education. What about people, I guess maybe a little older, maybe in their 30s or 40s, and their parents are now realizing, I'm older now too. What resources do you have for the, older people?
I think that's a really good question, because one thing is the increasing life expectancy is something that's in some ways new to all of us. We always say, Cammie mentioned SAS, which is Specialized Aging Support, and that is a program for people with or at risk of dementia. But most of the people with Down syndrome and dementia receive a dementia diagnosis late 50s, early 60s, and you have to think 20 years ago, people with Down syndrome didn't live that long. So in some ways, that's almost like a new crisis that we're dealing with now. We just started the Specialized Aging Support Program because we see the need for both the participant aging along with their parent, and that has a huge caregiver component. And we also are now partnering with our local aging providers, Aging True, and Elder Source, to try to connect with those families, because what we're figuring out is they're going in to help a caregiver and realizing, oh, they have an adult child here also. There's this dual need. So but that's all very new to us, to be totally honest, but something I feel like, again, in Jacksonville, we're pretty well positioned for because of the community structure.
Carrie, I think I know the answer, but you talk about the 10-year wait list on the waiver, right? How soon can someone, so if I'm 17, I might have another year or 2 years in school, but I know that I'm going to be leaving that. Can they get on the waiver list early in terms of shortening that clock?
Yes. Yeah, you can get on the waiver list really early, like young child early, as soon as you really have a diagnosis. The requirement is the diagnosis has to be present at or near birth, so that's kind of the big differentiator. But that is hugely important, because we always tell families, you may not need it today, you may not need it in 10 years, but if you go ahead and complete the process, you're there, you're waiting. Not only is the clock ticking, so you're sitting in that category, but if you suddenly did have a crisis, it's almost, the wait list operates kind of like an ER triage, so the person in the most need kind of gets bumped to the top of the list. So let's say you're 17, you turn 18, and something happens to your parents. Then it's more of a phone call to say, hey, this situation's changed, this is a crisis, versus starting over where you have at least 6 months just to get there. So there's actually a campaign we're doing through ARC Florida called Be Prepared, which is just saying, get on the list, You may not need it now, but if something happens, it's much easier to get services in a crisis if you're on the list. That is a huge message that we're trying to drive home, because we do see so many people. I can't tell you the stories of people. I had my first job, someone showed up in my office and said they had a brother with Down syndrome. He had to be in his 50s. And they said, he lived with our mom. Our mom died yesterday. We live in Philadelphia. What do we do? They had never put him on the wait list. I mean, that's a crisis, really, in that moment that largely could have been somewhat mitigated.
And one last question, I'm sure other people. Who would you say in our legislative leaders are the best advocates for support of this work?
So for us, most of the legislative advocacy is on the state level. That's what drives it. There's a federal match, but we have to advocate on the state level. Recently, now Congressman Aaron Beam was a huge champion. We honestly got more due to his leadership than we really have in decades. So we're kind of in the search for a new champion right now. The next Speaker of the Senate, I want to say in 2 years, has a sibling with an intellectual difference. So we're kind of angling there a little bit and hoping that we can get an advocate out of that. I mean, being in the governor's budget today is noteworthy because it's a start. We have a lot of work to do. It's not what we need. I think it's funding for like 1,000 people on the wait list or something to that nature. And as Matt mentioned, there's over 20,000 people on the wait list. But it is a start. And truly, it's families going, just locally, when we had our local delegation meeting, I brought a mom with me because her story, she actually has waiver services, but the funding is so low for the services, she can't hire and keep anyone. So we always say we need wait list funding, but we need to strengthen the system. Otherwise, you're getting almost like a currency you can't use. So we're kind of advocating for both right now.
To append the question that President Meehan just stated, as an ally and a person who applauds the efforts of both the ARC and the YMCA Daystar, I want to know what is your lobbying effort, knowing that you have a wait list of 23,000 and you know that IEPs are increasing annually and you have more and more people who are aging out of IEPs with this, spectrum of autism and so many other people of different abilities. How can we help you with the lobbying effort, knowing that the session starts in January?
We'll call you. Yes, that is great.
I have her number.
Okay. Because we have meetings, we have speakers, we need passionate people to really drive that point home, other than us, because it really needs to come from people. We do have formalized lobbying efforts. It's a tough, I think Matt mentioned, unless you know someone, you don't necessarily relate. And as big as our needs are, they're actually not that big for the state. But getting people to see, the good thing is we're a nonpartisan issue, which is great. I mean, we can go talk to anyone, and most people believe that if anyone deserves support, certainly the people we support do. But we take our show on the road. There was an article probably 2 weeks ago in the Orlando Sentinel about the state reverting a lot of money that went unspent in the APD, which is the Agency for Persons with Disability budget. And so we're doing some efforts around those. We're also doing that delicately because we're also trying to have friends at the same time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I understand that the funding comes from the state, but in a situation where a family would need, with a person with intellectual disabilities, needed to move out of state, I know for myself that's been an issue in the past. We've had to turn down opportunities, which is fine, but not to be able to take our son, with us because we looked into it and realized he would lose his funding, that it's not a federal thing. Do you think that'll ever change, that it could be transferable to other states?
There has been a little traction recently. If you don't, I'd follow the ARC US because they have led a few initiatives to make that possible. I think that would actually, there would be a lot of a lot of good that would come out of that, and there's a way to do it that wouldn't impact states so negatively. That's something we have all the time in Florida. People show up and say, oh, I had services in New York, and we're like, ooh, you're starting totally over. And if you don't know that when you get here, that is an alarming situation, and it does limit families, with the exception, there are some exceptions for military and other families that get a little portability, but right now, you are correct, there is not. But there has been a few recent failed attempts at legislation, but I expect that will keep coming up until there hopefully is some success.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. No one else? Perfect.
Now that the population of persons with intellectual differences are living longer and healthier than they did in the past, what kind of things should parents be looking at? I would assume that they're now outliving their parents. So what kind of provision should parents be looking at, and how does the ARC help them in that?
That's a great question, because that, again, is kind of a new thing we're seeing, where most parents have almost counted on that they were going to outlive their child. And when that doesn't happen and there's not good plans in place, any number of things can happen to that child. So we just, about 2 years ago, started a program that an attorney has kind of led called Life Path. It's a plan, it's a form of life planning that says, okay, what are your hopes and dreams for your child, and who's going to take care of every aspect of this? So that if and when, hopefully, the child does outlive the parent, really all the parents' work that they have done to set their child up for success can continue, and there's things in place. And it can be family, but oftentimes, I have a sister, I love her dearly, but I really love my children a lot, right? So what I'm gonna do for my children is a little different than what I'm gonna do for my siblings. So oftentimes when something happens to a parent, there needs to be a team that steps in. The Life Path planning process kind of sits down with families and goes through that. And we're really encouraging families to have those conversations. It's hard because it's like any form of advanced planning and estates and wills. No one wants to deal with it. It's a conversation no one wants to talk about. But it is critical that we help families think through that. So if you're in churches or at the Y and you know people who are taking care of an adult child, kind of asking those, like, do you have a plan? Oh, there are programs out there that can help people come up with a plan.
Thank you. So again, Carrie, Matt, great job. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, and just thank you to everyone that was, here with us in this space of just learning, supporting, and continue to bring awareness specifically to this community. So thank you. We hope you enjoyed yourself, asked all great questions, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your night. Sorry. My apologies. Quincy and Rachel are going to come up and close us out. But again, thank you.
I'm Rachel Sandler with the JCA. On behalf of the JCA and YMCA, thank you for attending the program tonight. Thank you to Erica Moore for moderating our discussion, and a special thanks to our panelists, Matthew Rochester and Carrie Bates. Together Against Hate shirts are available for purchase in the back corner of the room. And thank you to everyone for signing the banner. And if you did not get to do so, please do so on your way out and receive your decal. This banner will be traveling around to all of our programs.
I'm Quincy Wimberly with the YMCA. Our speaker series concludes on January 18th at 7 p.m. at the Downtown Library. The theme is Interfaith, and the Interfaith Center and OneJax will be moderating this event. The entire series culminates with Racing Against Hate 5K run or walk on February 25th at 1 p.m. at the Winston YMCA. Look for an upcoming email with a survey and a copy of the video recording. Thank you for joining us for Together Against Hate to help promote unity within our community. Thank you.